Welcome back. Today we do a quick one on the recent releases by topping on the 50 series. This is the A50 III. This is the D50 III. So the latest in the 50 series, third revision, I guess is how they would call it. But yeah, this is actually a very familiar set to me because I had actually started out with a D50S a long time ago. So, you can kind of see they are actually very familiar. They have kept a lot of the design from the original all the way through into the new one. But on the A50 III, if you're familiar with that one, so power button also serves as gain. So you get high, medium, and low gain, 6.35, 4.4, balanced out, volume knob. On the D50 III, you do get the power button, you do get a multifunction screen, and you do get a joystick for navigating the menus and selecting options and all the things that you would need to do on the DAC, since it does do Bluetooth and it does do PCM modes and filters. Lots of stuff that's actually buried in a really small screen, but a lot of similarity in design and how you navigate and use it from the original D50S. So this will be a little bit of maybe more of a story than review, because as I said, I actually bought a used D50S a long time ago. This is one of the weird topping models where you can open it up and swap out the op amp. So at the time, I had actually swapped out the op amp, so it is a little bit more dialed in than maybe the stock version, but essentially this was a very nice portable small desktop unit that I had used to maybe craft my preferences on amps, because, consistent DAC, and then I got to try this DAC on lots of portable amps that I was buying on AliExpress. I later picked up a topping G5. I later picked up a topping desktop, a DX5. So I'm sort of very familiar with the topping sound in this price point. I do like the topping sound. So when Apos Audio said, hey, we'll let you borrow the new stack, the new threes, super excited because I never heard the A50, but I was very familiar with and very partial and very much like the original D50. So super excited to hear the new pair. So we'll jump into it there and say, so what are they? They are affordable, small footprint stack. One's $199 and one's about $220, so about $430 stack that you get. And again, like I said, you can actually start with just the DAC and plug it into cheaper amps if that's where you want to start the hobby. I didn't want to jump into a $400 commitment at the time, so I bought this one used. You could probably buy this one used on topping at this point. But yeah, it's a very nice way to experiment with your own preferences and figure out what you like and you don't like without paying the cost of buying both of them. You can actually start with one or both of them. It actually doesn't really matter. As I said, I had started out with portable amps, but if you want to start out with a desktop amp and different DACs, you could do that as well. So the topping A50 III, the big guy on top, that's about 3.5 watts, about 3,500 milliwatts. And, so a very powerful desktop in a small footprint. Like I said, I have the G5, which is like a smaller brother to this one, but the portable version with the battery, so not quite as powerful, but still gives you a taste of the topping sound. And the A50 is exactly what you would expect in the full-size topping desktop style sound. It's exactly what I thought it was going to sound like, actually, never having heard the original A50, but having heard the G5 and then hearing the DX5, the A50 III is exactly what I thought it was going to sound like. If you are very familiar with toppings, flat, neutral, uncolored, extended sound, linear sound, exactly what you get in A50 III, exactly what I was expecting, and it delivers exactly what I thought it was going to be. So no surprises on the A50 III. It's a very solid, exactly what I expected as far as a topping amp. And yeah, I think the rest of it, you do get 6.35 single-ended, 4.4 balanced, RCAs, TRS. So the back of this guy, if you are an XLR fan, you're not so much going to get that here, but you do get TRSs if you want to do balanced. So you can run TRS, basically patch cords from the DAC right into the amp if you're interested in running actually a fully balanced system. So, and in the gain system, you do get high, medium, and low, and you do get a very low output impedance of 0.2. So again, I very much love toppings, very low impedance, near zero impedance, high power, low impedance. That is my favorite combination, and that's sort of why I'm partial to topping units, and these two are sort of no different. So the A50 sound, again, like I said, topping expectations delivered in a nicely machined aluminum box. Exactly what I was expecting. No surprises. It's pretty much exactly what I thought. If you're expecting a neutral, flat, uncolored, extended desktop amp, that's exactly what you get. No surprises, as I said. The topping amp sound that can be paired with a D50 or your DAC of choice through RCA TRS, which would be my preference. So again, very versatile units. You don't have to buy them at the same time. You can actually use this with a different DAC. You can use it with a dongle and sort of upgrade your sound that way. Or you can just buy the DAC and run that into your portable desktop amps. So yeah, I think we always talk about them as a stack, but they actually do function on their own if you pair them with some other gear that you already have. So the D50 III specs, this one is a dual ES9039Q2M, does have Bluetooth, does do LDAC, it does have dual Type-C in the back, one you can actually use as USB, one for power, does do optical, does do coax, and they do have something called PEQ. They have a whole PEQ system, which we'll talk about in a second, through Tune and the PC app. So the D50 sound, and again, this is sort of where I'm a little bit biased towards the original D50S because I'd spent so much time with it, and then the D50 III kind of shows up, and I'm like, well, it's not quite the same. It's not quite what I was expecting. And I will say, kind of straight out of the box, the A50 and D50 as a duo, as a stack, as a pair, sounded a little lighter in weight, less extended, and smaller than I was expecting. It's kind of hard to get a immersive experience out of these two. And I think in isolation, if I had never heard the original D50 and I had just purchased these two from Apos Audio, I'd probably say they sound amazing and great and exactly what I thought a topping pair at this price point would sound like. But as I said, I'm a little biased because I knew what this one sounded like, and I immediately reached for it and then plugged it into the A50, and I sort of noticed there is a difference between the two. And maybe it's the op amp, maybe it's just how they've changed over time. Maybe I'm just partial to how the A50 or the D50 original sounds, and I know that DACs are supposed to be transparent and all that, but I will say that there's something different about the D50 that I was more partial to my original. And I ended up basically kind of swapping out the D50 III, and I much preferred the D50, my original D50S paired with the A50 III. It sounds exactly how I thought it was going to sound. A perfect topping stack at a price point that was very affordable, small boxes, no surprises. It sounded exactly like topping house sound should sound. And the D50 III, not quite there. So while I would say the D50 III didn't exactly meet my expectations on sound, so the D50 III makes up for it with Topping's new Topping Tune app on your PC. This is what the PEQ interface looks like to the D50 III. So very, very cool, very unique, and I think it only works with the D50 III at this point in time, but it's exactly as it looks, right? It's a very, very convenient, super friendly PEQ interface. You get the plot. You do get a very quick, real-time, interactive. This thing is almost instantaneous. And you can store the configuration on the D50 as well. So you actually have a local configuration. You actually have the configurations that are stored on the D50 III, and you can select them from the joystick menu as well. So I thought, while I wasn't super keen on the sound on the D50 III, the idea of using a PEQ on your desktop that is so interactive and quick and responsive with the D50 III. And as I said, my workflow is usually with foobar and its EQ, and that's great because it works with foobar. But outside of foobar, if you want to listen to a streaming service or something else, that doesn't really do you any good because that's only limited to foobar. So doing PEQ on your DAC really gets you a global PEQ, and that's exactly what most people want, and that is super convenient. And so, yeah, very much props to Topping for doing this because it's unique, and I think going forward in the future, while the D50 III probably wouldn't be my DAC choice, I think as they roll this out to other DACs in the future, I can definitely see that at some point in time I will gravitate towards one of those boxes, because this is essentially what I do on a daily basis. I'm sitting there in foobar, moving PEQ, using moving sliders around on EQ, but what I would rather do is basically do this on my DAC and then store the configuration on the DAC. Then I don't have to worry about dealing with it on my PC. I can hook up other sources to it, and yeah, so very, very cool feature. Very unique feature to the D50 III right now, but hopefully as they roll this out into other units, we'll see that take off. But yeah, I think, yeah, between the two, I think the A50, very, very solid, exactly what I was expecting as a topping amp. And then the D50 III, yeah, maybe the sound not as what I was expecting, but this functionality is actually going to be very, very cool. And for those of you into PEQ and audio EQ and all the forms of parametric equalization, I think this is going to be one of those standout features going forward that will make topping a little more attractive for those of you who haven't looked at it yet. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.